are the one who caused the accident!
No, I have never caused an accident in my life.
Cops stopped the wrong bike. Minutes later, 50 soldiers in Humvees arrived, led by a captain. The desert highway stretched endlessly under the blazing Arizona sun as Staff Sergeant Miguel Santos guided his motorcycle through the sparse traffic on Interstate 40. His black Harley-Davidson rumbled beneath him, a therapeutic sound that helped quiet the memories that sometimes threatened to overwhelm him during these long rides between Phoenix and his new duty station at Fort Huachuca. Miguel wore civilian clothes, dark jeans, a plain black t-shirt, and a leather jacket despite the heat. At 32, he carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who had seen combat in 3 deployments to Afghanistan. His dark hair was regulation short, and his posture, even on the motorcycle, reflected 15 years of military discipline. The bike itself was his pride and joy, a 2019 Road King that he had bought with his re-enlistment bonus 2 years ago. It was completely stock, well-maintained, and legal in every way. Miguel was meticulous about following traffic laws. Military police training had made him acutely aware of the importance of proper procedures and legal compliance. What Miguel didn't know was that 30 miles ahead, the Cochise County Sheriff's Department had issued a BOLO Be on the Lookout alert for a black Harley-Davidson motorcycle involved in a hit-and-run accident that morning. The suspect bike had allegedly struck a pedestrian in Tucson and fled the scene. The description was vague black Harley male rider heading east on I-40, but it was enough to put every law enforcement officer in the area on high alert. Deputy Jake Morrison was having a particularly stressful day. The hit-and-run case had generated significant media attention because the victim was a prominent local businessman, and pressure was mounting from his supervisors to make an arrest quickly. Morrison was a 10-year veteran of the Sheriff's Department, but he had developed a reputation for aggressive tactics and quick judgments that sometimes got him into trouble. As Miguel crested a hill about 15 miles outside of Benson, Arizona, he saw the distinctive silhouette of a police cruiser parked on the shoulder ahead. Deputy Morrison had positioned his vehicle strategically to observe traffic, and when he spotted the black Harley approaching, his adrenaline immediately spiked. Miguel noticed the police car and instinctively checked his speedometer. He was doing exactly 75 mph, the posted speed limit. His registration was current, his license was valid, and he had done nothing wrong. Still, years of military training had taught him to be prepared for unexpected situations. As he passed the cruiser, Miguel saw the officer pull out behind him in his rearview mirror. The red and blue lights activated immediately, and Miguel felt his stomach tighten. He had been pulled over exactly twice in his 15-year driving career, both times for minor infractions that had resulted in warnings rather than tickets. Miguel signaled and pulled over to the shoulder, following proper protocol. What he didn't realize was that Deputy Morrison had already called for backup and was approaching this traffic stop as if he were apprehending a dangerous fugitive rather than conducting a routine investigation. Miguel turned off his motorcycle and remained seated, keeping his hands visible on the handlebars as Deputy Morrison approached. His military training had taught him that compliance and clear communication were essential during any law enforcement encounter, regardless of the circumstances. License and registration. Morrison barked, his hand resting on his service weapon. His tone was aggressive and confrontational, suggesting he had already decided Miguel was guilty of something. "Yes, sir," Miguel replied calmly, slowly reaching for his wallet. "My registration is in the saddlebag. May I retrieve it?" Slowly, Morrison commanded, stepping back slightly. Miguel carefully opened his saddlebag and retrieved his registration documents, then handed them over, along with his military ID and Arizona driver's license. Morrison examined the documents with the expression of someone looking for discrepancies. "Staff Sergeant Miguel Santos," Morrison read aloud, "what's your business on this highway today?" "I'm traveling from Phoenix to Fort Huachuca for a new assignment, sir. I'm military police being transferred to the 902nd Military Intelligence Group." Morrison's expression didn't soften despite learning that Miguel was active duty military. If anything, he seemed more suspicious. "Where were you this morning around 9 a.m.? Miguel thought carefully. "I was at the Phoenix VA hospital for a medical appointment. Then I had breakfast at a diner on Indian School Road before starting my drive." "Why do you ask?" "There was a hit and run in Tucson this morning. Black Harley male rider. You matched the description." Miguel felt his heart rate increase, but he maintained his calm demeanor. "Sir, I haven't been to Tucson in over 6 months. I can provide receipts from the VA hospital and the diner, if that would help." Morrison was already convinced he had found his suspect. The bike matched, the rider matched, and in his experience, everyone had an alibi. "Step off the motorcycle and put your hands behind your back." "Deputy, I think there's been a misunderstanding." "Now," Morrison shouted, his weapon now partially drawn. Miguel complied immediately, his military training overriding his natural inclination to argue. As Morrison began to handcuff him, Miguel spoke clearly and calmly. "Deputy Morrison, I'm requesting that you contact my commanding officer, Captain Sarah Rodriguez, at Fort Huachuca. I'm also requesting that you verify my whereabouts this morning through the VA hospital security cameras. You can make your requests from the county jail," Morrison replied, tightening the handcuffs more than necessary. What Morrison didn't know was that Miguel's new assignment at Fort Huachuca was highly classified. He wasn't just any military police officer. He was a counterintelligence specialist who had been handpicked for a sensitive operation involving border security and drug interdiction. His commanding officer, Captain Rodriguez, had been expecting his arrival and had specific instructions to be notified immediately if there were any issues with his travel. As Morrison placed Miguel in the back of his patrol car, the staff sergeant made a decision that would change everything. Using the hands-free system in his motorcycle helmet, which was still connected to his phone via Bluetooth, he activated a pre-programmed emergency contact. "Emergency contact activated," the automated system announced. "Contacting Captain Rodriguez, Fort Huachuca." Captain Sarah Rodriguez was in a briefing with her battalion commander when her phone rang with Miguel's emergency signal. She had served with Miguel in Afghanistan and knew him to be one of the most reliable and professional soldiers she had ever commanded. If he was using his emergency contact, something was seriously wrong. "Sir, I need to take this call," she told her commander. "It's from Staff Sergeant Santos, and he's using his emergency protocol." The call connected just as Morrison was preparing to transport Miguel to the county jail. Through the Bluetooth connection, Captain Rodriguez could hear everything that was happening. "Staff Sergeant Santos, this is Captain Rodriguez. report your status." Miguel's voice came through clearly despite the handcuffs and the awkward position in the patrol car. "Ma'am, I've been detained by Cochise County Sheriff's Department on suspicion of hit and run. I'm currently in custody on Interstate 40, approximately 15 miles east of Benson." Captain Rodriguez's expression hardened. Miguel Santos was not just one of her soldiers, he was carrying classified materials related to their upcoming operation, and his detention by civilian law enforcement could compromise national security. "Staff Sergeant, maintain your position. Help is en route." Captain Rodriguez immediately activated the emergency response protocol that had been established for situations involving the compromise of classified personnel or materials. Within minutes, she had contacted the base commander, the military police, and the FBI liaison officer assigned to Fort Huachuca. "Colonel Martinez," she said to her commanding officer, "Staff Sergeant Santos has been detained by civilian law enforcement while carrying classified materials. We need to implement immediate extraction protocols." Colonel Martinez understood the implications immediately. Miguel wasn't just carrying documents, he was transporting encrypted communication equipment and intelligence files related to a joint military DEA operation targeting drug cartels along the Arizona-Mexico border. His detention could expose ongoing investigations and put undercover agents at risk. "Captain Rodriguez, take a full platoon and retrieve our soldier immediately. Coordinate with the FBI to ensure proper jurisdiction is established." Meanwhile, Deputy Morrison was completely unaware of the storm he had unleashed. He was driving toward the county jail with Miguel in the back seat, feeling satisfied that he had solved the hit-and-run case quickly and efficiently. His radio crackled with routine traffic, and he had no idea that multiple federal agencies were now tracking his location. Miguel remained calm in the back seat, using his training to assess the situation and plan for various contingencies. He knew that Captain Rodriguez would respond quickly, but he also knew that the situation could escalate rapidly if not handled properly. "Deputy Morrison," Miguel said respectfully, "I strongly recommend that you contact your supervisor before proceeding further. This situation is more complicated than it appears." Morrison glanced in his rearview mirror. "Save it for the Judge Santos. You can tell your story to the district attorney." What Morrison didn't see was the convoy of military vehicles that had just left Fort Huachuca at high speed. Captain Rodriguez was leading a column of 3 Humvees carrying a full platoon of military police along with a communications vehicle and a command vehicle. They were traveling under emergency protocols with full military authority to retrieve their detained soldier. The convoy also included FBI Special Agent Jennifer Walsh, who had been working closely with the military on the border security operation. Agent Walsh had the authority to assert federal jurisdiction over the case and had already begun the paperwork to transfer custody of Miguel from local law enforcement to federal authorities. As Morrison's patrol car approached the outskirts of Benson, his radio suddenly came alive with urgent traffic from his dispatcher. "Unit 47, this is dispatch. You are ordered to stop your vehicle immediately and await further instructions. Do not proceed to the county jail." Morrison was confused and irritated. "Dispatch, I have a suspect in custody for the Tucson hit and run. I'm transporting to county for booking." "Unit 47 negative. Stop your vehicle now and await the arrival of federal authorities. This is a direct order from Sheriff Williams." Morrison pulled over, his mind racing. Federal authorities. What could possibly warrant federal involvement in a simple hit-and-run case? In the back seat, Miguel allowed himself a small smile. "Deputy, I tried to warn you that this situation was more complicated than it appeared." "What the hell is going on?" Morrison demanded. "I'm not just any soldier, Deputy. I'm carrying classified materials related to national security operations. My detention has triggered federal response protocols." Morrison's face went pale as the implications began to sink in. He had arrested a soldier carrying classified materials without following proper procedures or verifying his story. This could be a career-ending mistake. Within minutes, the sound of multiple vehicles approaching at high speed could be heard in the distance. Morrison looked in his mirrors and saw a convoy of military vehicles approaching with lights flashing and sirens wailing. The convoy pulled up around Morrison's patrol car in a tactical formation that demonstrated both overwhelming force and professional discipline. Soldiers in full combat gear emerged from the Humvees, establishing a security perimeter, while Captain Rodriguez approached the patrol car. Morrison stepped out of his vehicle, his hand shaking slightly, as he realized the magnitude of his error. Captain Rodriguez was a woman in her late 30s, with the bearing of someone accustomed to command and the intensity of someone who did not tolerate interference with her soldiers. "Deputy Morrison," Captain Rodriguez said, her voice carrying absolute authority. "I am Captain Sarah Rodriguez, United States Army. You are currently detaining one of my soldiers who is carrying classified materials related to national security operations." FBI Special Agent Walsh stepped forward, displaying her credentials. "Deputy Morrison, I'm Special Agent Walsh with the FBI. We're asserting federal jurisdiction over this case. Staff Sergeant Santos is to be released to military custody immediately." Morrison looked around at the overwhelming display of federal and military authority surrounding him. 50 soldiers, FBI agents, and military police officers had responded to his traffic stop. He was beginning to understand that he had made a very serious mistake. I was just following up on a bolo for a hit-and-run suspect," Morrison stammered. Deputy Agent Walsh said firmly, "Staff Sergeant Santos was at the Phoenix VA hospital at the time of the alleged hit-and-run. We've already verified his alibi through hospital security footage and GPS tracking from his military-issued phone." The situation on the desert highway had escalated far beyond a simple traffic stop. Deputy Morrison found himself at the center of an international incident that could potentially compromise ongoing military operations and damage relationships between federal and local law enforcement agencies. Captain Rodriguez approached Morrison's patrol car where Miguel remained handcuffed in the back seat. Her expression was controlled but clearly angry as she assessed her soldier's condition. "Staff Sergeant Santos, are you injured?" she asked through the window. "No, ma'am, I'm fine. Deputy Morrison followed proper arrest procedures, but I believe there's been a case of mistaken identity." Captain Rodriguez appreciated Miguel's professional response, but she was furious about the situation. Miguel was carrying encrypted communication equipment that was essential to their upcoming operation, and every minute he remained in civilian custody increased the risk of security compromise. "Deputy Morrison," Agent Walsh said, her voice taking on a more serious tone, "I need you to understand the gravity of this situation. Staff Sergeant Santos is not just any soldier. He's a counterintelligence specialist carrying materials related to ongoing operations against drug cartels on the Mexican border. Morrison's face went from pale to ashen. Drug cartel operations meant that this case could involve federal prosecutors, international law enforcement, and potentially dangerous criminal organizations who would be very interested in disrupting military intelligence operations. Agent Walsh, I was just doing my job. The bolo described a black Harley mail rider involved in a hit and run. Santos matched the description perfectly. Deputy, did you verify his alibi before making the arrest? Did you check with the VA hospital? Did you review any security footage or GPS data? Morrison's silence was answer enough. In his eagerness to solve the case quickly, he had skipped the basic investigative steps that might have prevented this entire situation. Sheriff Tom Williams arrived on scene just as the tension was reaching its peak. Williams was a 30-year law enforcement veteran who had worked closely with federal agencies throughout his career. He took one look at the military convoy and FBI presence and immediately understood that his department was in serious trouble. "Agent Walsh, Captain Rodriguez," Sheriff Williams said as he approached. "I'm Sheriff Williams. I apologize for this situation. Deputy Morrison was acting on a legitimate bolo, but it appears he may have been overzealous in his response." Captain Rodriguez turned to face the sheriff, her expression stern. "Sheriff Williams, your deputy arrested one of my soldiers without proper verification, potentially compromising a classified operation. This isn't just overzealousness. This is a failure of basic police procedure." The real crisis emerged when Agent Walsh received a call on her secure phone. She stepped away from the group to take the call, and when she returned, her expression was grim. "Captain Rodriguez, we have a problem. Word of Staff Sergeant Santos's detention has somehow leaked to local media. There are news crews en route to this location." The implications were staggering. If news of Miguel's arrest became public, it could expose the entire border security operation. Cartel intelligence networks monitored local news closely, and they would immediately understand that a military counterintelligence operation was underway. "How did the media find out?" Captain Rodriguez demanded. Sheriff Williams looked at Deputy Morrison, who was now sweating profusely despite the desert heat. "Morrison, did you call this in to anyone other than dispatch?" Morrison's guilty expression provided the answer. I may have mentioned it to my girlfriend. She works for the local newspaper. I thought it would be good publicity for the department to solve the hit-and-run case so quickly." The silence that followed was deafening. Morrison had not only arrested the wrong person, but he had potentially compromised a federal operation by leaking information to the media. Agent Walsh was already on her phone coordinating with federal agencies to implement damage control measures. "We need to establish a media blackout immediately. This operation involves national security." Captain Rodriguez made a decision that would demonstrate the professionalism and discipline that separated military operations from civilian law enforcement. "Sheriff Williams, I'm going to give you an opportunity to handle this situation properly. Transfer Staff Sergeant Santos to our custody immediately, and we'll work together to contain the media situation." "But what about the hit-and-run case?" Morrison asked, desperately. Agent Walsh looked at him with barely concealed contempt. "Deputy Morrison, the actual hit-and-run suspect, was arrested in Tucson 2 hours ago. The real perpetrator turned himself in after seeing news coverage of the incident. You arrested an innocent man based on a vague description without conducting any actual investigation. Morrison's career was effectively over, but the immediate crisis was just beginning. In the distance, the first news van could be seen approaching on the highway. The arrival of the news crews created an immediate tactical problem that required careful coordination between military and civilian authorities. Captain Rodriguez quickly assessed the situation and began implementing damage control measures that would protect both the classified operation and the relationships between federal and local law enforcement. Agent Walsh, Captain Rodriguez, said, "We need to establish a security perimeter immediately. No media personnel can be allowed close enough to photograph or identify Staff Sergeant Santos or any of the classified equipment." The military police soldiers moved with practiced efficiency, establishing a wide perimeter around the scene while keeping their weapons holstered and their demeanor professional. The goal was to demonstrate authority without appearing threatening to the media or the public. Sheriff Williams, recognizing that his department's reputation was on the line, took charge of managing his own personnel. "Deputy Morrison, you are relieved of duty effective immediately. Report to headquarters for administrative review." Morrison's face crumpled as he realized his career was over. "Sheriff, I was just trying to do my job. I thought I had the right guy." "Morrison, you arrested a soldier carrying classified materials without conducting basic verification procedures, then leaked information about the arrest to the media. This isn't just a mistake, it's a series of catastrophic failures that could compromise national security." As the news crews set up their equipment at the edge of the security perimeter, Agent Walsh coordinated with federal agencies to implement a comprehensive media strategy. The goal was to control the narrative without appearing to suppress legitimate news coverage. "Captain Rodriguez," Agent Walsh said, "I've spoken with the Department of Defense press office. They're prepared to issue a statement about a routine military exercise that required coordination with local law enforcement. We can frame this as a successful interagency cooperation rather than a law enforcement failure." Miguel finally released from the handcuffs and reunited with his military equipment, approached Captain Rodriguez with a suggestion that demonstrated his understanding of both military operations and public relations. "Ma'am, if I may suggest, we could use this situation to actually enhance our operational security. If the media reports that we're conducting routine exercises with local law enforcement, it provides cover for our actual border operations." Captain Rodriguez smiled for the first time since arriving on scene. This was exactly the kind of strategic thinking that had made Miguel such a valuable asset to their unit. "Excellent point, Staff Sergeant. Agent Walsh, can we coordinate a brief media statement that emphasizes successful federal-local cooperation while maintaining operational security?" The climax of the situation came when the lead news reporter, Jennifer Martinez from Phoenix Channel 12, approached the security perimeter with her camera crew. She was an experienced journalist who specialized in law enforcement stories, and she immediately recognized that this was more than a routine traffic stop. "Sheriff Williams," she called out, "can you comment on why federal agents and military personnel responded to what appears to be a simple traffic stop?" Sheriff Williams, coached by Agent Walsh, stepped forward to address the media. This was a planned exercise designed to test coordination between local law enforcement and federal agencies. Staff Sergeant Santos volunteered to participate in the exercise to help us evaluate our response procedures. The reporter wasn't entirely convinced, but the presence of 50 soldiers and FBI agents suggested that this was indeed a significant operation rather than a simple mistake. Captain Rodriguez then made a decision that turned the crisis into an opportunity. She approached the media area in full dress uniform accompanied by Miguel, who was now also in military uniform. "Ladies and gentlemen," Captain Rodriguez announced, "I'm Captain Sarah Rodriguez, United States Army. What you witnessed today was a successful test of our ability to coordinate with local law enforcement agencies in support of border security operations." She gestured toward Miguel. Staff Sergeant Santos is a military police officer who specializes in interagency cooperation. Today's exercise demonstrated that our local law enforcement partners are vigilant and professional in their response to potential security threats. The reporter raised her hand. "Captain Rodriguez, can you comment on the specific nature of the border security operations you mentioned?" "I can tell you that the United States military works closely with local law enforcement agencies to support border security and counter-narcotics operations. Today's exercise was designed to test our communication and coordination procedures." Agent Walsh stepped forward to add federal credibility to the statement. "The FBI works closely with both military and local law enforcement agencies to address threats to national security. Today's exercise was part of our ongoing efforts to ensure seamless cooperation between all levels of law enforcement." The media strategy was working. What had started as a potential disaster was being reframed as a successful demonstration of interagency cooperation. The reporters were getting a story about effective law enforcement coordination rather than a story about bureaucratic failures. Miguel, demonstrating the media skills that had made him valuable for counterintelligence work, addressed the cameras directly. "I want to thank Sheriff Williams and his department for their professionalism during today's exercise. The coordination we demonstrated today will help us better protect our communities and our borders." Sheriff Williams, grateful for the opportunity to salvage his department's reputation, added his own statement. "We're proud to work with our federal partners in support of national security. Today's exercise demonstrated that our officers are prepared to respond effectively to any situation." As the news crews packed up their equipment satisfied with their story about successful law enforcement cooperation, Agent Walsh pulled Captain Rodriguez aside. "Captain, that was masterful. You turned a potential security breach into positive publicity for interagency cooperation." Captain Rodriguez looked at Miguel, who was securing his classified equipment in the military vehicles. "Agent Walsh, that's what good soldiers do. They adapt to changing circumstances and complete the mission regardless of obstacles." The convoy prepared to depart for Fort Huachuca, leaving behind a situation that had been successfully resolved through professional cooperation and strategic communication. Deputy Morrison, meanwhile, faced an uncertain future as his law enforcement career came to an end due to his failure to follow basic procedures and his breach of operational security. 6 months after the incident on Interstate 40, the repercussions continued to ripple through multiple organizations and careers. The routine exercise that had been reported by the media had indeed provided excellent cover for the actual border security operations, which had resulted in several major arrests and the disruption of significant drug trafficking networks. Staff Sergeant Miguel Santos had been promoted to Sergeant First Class and was now serving as the primary liaison between military intelligence and local law enforcement agencies throughout Arizona. His professional handling of the detention incident had earned him recognition from both military and federal law enforcement leadership. The way Sergeant Santos handled that situation demonstrated exactly the kind of professionalism and adaptability we need in our counterintelligence specialists. Captain Rodriguez wrote in his promotion recommendation, "He turned a potential security breach into an operational advantage." Deputy Morrison had been terminated from the Cochise County Sheriff's Department and was facing potential federal charges for compromising a classified operation. His case had become a cautionary tale used in law enforcement training programs about the importance of following proper procedures and maintaining operational security. Sheriff Williams had implemented new training protocols for his department, emphasizing the importance of interagency coordination and proper verification procedures. The incident had ultimately strengthened relationships between his department and federal agencies, leading to better cooperation on border security issues. We learned valuable lessons about the importance of communication and verification, Sheriff Williams told a conference of law enforcement officials. One officer's failure to follow basic procedures could have compromised a major federal operation. The media coverage of the exercise had been so positive that it was used as a model for other interagency operations. The Department of Defense and FBI had developed new protocols for managing media attention during sensitive operations, using the Arizona incident as a template. Agent Walsh had been promoted to supervise a new task force focused on military-civilian law enforcement coordination. The Santos incident showed us that we need better communication between federal agencies and local law enforcement, she explained to her new team. Miguel's motorcycle had become something of a legend within military police circles. The bike that stopped 50 soldiers was featured in military police newsletters and training materials as an example of how quickly situations could escalate and how important proper procedures were in preventing misunderstandings. Most importantly, the border security operation that Miguel had been supporting was completed successfully, resulting in the arrest of several high-level cartel operatives and the seizure of millions of dollars in drugs and weapons. The wrong bike had indeed been stopped, but the professional response of military and federal personnel had turned a potential disaster into a successful demonstration of American law enforcement cooperation.